Hi, thanks again for joining me on another Bible talk. Now this talk is called Knowing God's Uncalling. Now what this is about, obviously what I want all of us to do, including myself, is we want to be people who are blessed of God, and like Abraham, being blessed to be a blessing just to other people, to multiply God's blessings, help others to know God, and just bring blessings. Just like the Apostle Paul. He knew God's grace, and then he talked about, wasn't it, by God's grace I am what I am, and isn't it, by God's grace I laboured more than ye all. So God's grace and favour, that enabled the Apostle Paul to be that blessing, just as it did with Abraham. So that's what I want for all of us at the end of the day, including me. But sometimes there might be things which we think they may be okay in themselves, they may be even good in themselves, but God, he's maybe not calling us specifically to do that thing. Or it might be that the season has come to an end. Now, because God's not calling us for that, we might find, well, there isn't God's grace for that particular thing. And then we just end up getting sort of worn out and frustrated. And then, of course, it makes it hard. And then sometimes, because we're not really in the flow of what God's blessing, we're getting frustrated. That means that we can't be the same blessing to the people that God wants us to bless. You know, we're not maybe just being that blessing, maybe with the attitudes and that, because we're kind of worn out. So what we need to do is we need to then hear God to take a step back from that, so we can then, because that'll just divert us from what God actually wants us to do. And we know that with Nehemiah, how Satan wanted to try and distract and divert Nehemiah from building the wall. And I believe Satan would want to distract us with maybe in a subtle way, maybe lots of things which maybe not obviously wrong in themselves, but they can wear us down. They can sort of drain us emotionally and physically. So I would just like to look at some verses from the Bible, and then we can just see what to avoid. And then as a result of that, as we just sort of looked at a couple months ago, be people like Abraham and like the Apostle Paul, who knew God's grace and blessings, and then were focused on the right thing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just going to first of all read some verses. Exodus chapter 18, verses 10 to 20 or so. And so this is obviously just after Moses, he led the children of Israel out of Egypt, and then he met up again with his father-in-law, Jethro. And we'll see that Jethro, in a sense, he'd almost like just become a believer in God. He'd come to put his trust in God. And then just after that, Jethro was then sort of like counseling Moses. So chapter 18, then Exodus 18, reading from verse 10, it says, And Jethro said, Blessed be the Lord, who hath delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians, and out of the hand of Pharaoh, who hath delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, for in the thing therein they dealt proudly, he was above them. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and sacrifices for God, and Aaron came, and all the elders of Israel, to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. And it came to pass on the morrow that Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood by Moses from the morning unto the evening. And when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he did to the people, he said, What is this thing that thou doest to the people? Why sittest thou thyself alone, and all the people stand by thee from morning until even? And Moses said unto his father-in-law, because the people come unto me to inquire of God. When they have a matter, they come unto me, and I judge between one and another, and I do make them know the statutes of God and his laws. And Moses' father-in-law said unto him, The thing that thou doest is not good. Thou wilt surely wear away, both thou and this people that is with thee, for this thing is too heavy for thee. Thou art not able to perform it thyself alone. Hearken now unto my voice. I will give thee counsel, and God shall be with thee. Be thou for the people to Godward, that thou mayest bring the causes unto God. And thou shalt teach them ordinances and laws, and shalt show them the way wherein they must walk, and the work they must do. Moreover, thou shalt provide out of all men, so out of all the people, able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands, and rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10, and let them judge the people at all season. And it shall be that every great matter they shall bring unto thee, but every small matter they shall judge. So shall it be easier for thyself, and they shall bear the burden with thee. So when we read on, that's to verse 22 actually, so you're getting 2-3 verses there. So when we read on, it tells us Moses, he hearkened unto the voice of his father-in-law. So Moses, he actually did that, and he judged the most serious matters, but he was able to delegate the thing. So Moses, he was initially doing something which was fine in itself, but I think we would sort of take that, even though it came from Jethro, who'd just like become a believer. It did seem, the way it's recorded, it did seem to be like words of wisdom, which God would have ordained, because it said that Jethro sort of departed after that. So Moses had to kind of step back from being the judge over everything and delegate things. So in a sense, that was like he was kind of hearing the task of judging everybody maybe as God's uncalling, that God wasn't expecting him to do it all, but to delegate, but obviously do what he could with the most serious matters. And then I'm going to read 1 Samuel chapter 16, and maybe just the first couple of verses. And the Lord said unto Samuel, How long wilt thou mourn for Saul, seeing I have rejected him from reigning over Israel? Fill thine horn with oil and go. I will send thee to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided me a king among his sons. And Samuel said, How can I go? If Saul hear it, he will kill me. And the Lord said, Take a heifer with thee, and say, I am come to sacrifice to the Lord, and call Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show thee what thou shalt do, and thou shalt anoint unto me him whom I name unto thee. So Samuel, he was still looking back to the past when Saul was the king. When Saul was the king of Israel, and he was still kind of like Samuel was hanging on to that, and God said, no, stop mourning after Saul. You need to move on to what I have called you to do. And sometimes we can kind of hang on to what's gone in the last season, or we might have been involved in something which we think is good. We put a lot of time and maybe energy into it, but maybe over a long time. And obviously the things which God is calling us to do, which you have your everyday commitments, which are right for you to do, yet we're going to get tired. We need to take a break and pace ourselves. So I'm not talking about that, because even things which God calls you to do, there will be times that you'll feel tired and you just need to take your rest and just pray, carry on in the strength of the Lord. But then there might be other things. You're getting tired, and at the end of the day, it's sort of tiring, and frustrating and maybe fruitless, you're not, over a long time, you're not seeing a lot of fruit, then you really need to ask yourself, well, is God actually calling me to this? Because God gives grace for his calling. So which means then, if you're doing something over a long time, it's frustrating, and you don't really sense the blessing and grace of God over it over a long time, you've really got to wonder, well, maybe God's wanting me to lay this on, or maybe pass it on. Maybe it's a good thing in itself, but God's actually calling somebody else to serve in it rather than you. Or maybe it's just something which God just isn't blessing in the first place. So the thing is to sometimes know when to put something, and in fact it can be very, I believe it can be very kind of liberating if there's something's been frustrating you over a long time and you've had this kind of compulsion to do it, and then you sense, well, hang on, maybe the Lord's telling you to lay it down and do something else. And you might, when you realise that, well, the reason it's been hard going might be because God's not been blessing it. And that can be liberating, because that means you're being released from that, or in a sense, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place, or God wants you to move into something which he is blessing. And then like Abram, you can then say, well, I'm being now blessed to be a blessing. And like the Apostle Paul, you can then say, well, by grace, God's grace, I laboured more than ye all. So yeah, so some things you might have to lay down, even the good, because sometimes they say the greatest enemy of God's best for you is the good. So some things you might be going for something because, well, it seems to be good, but it might not be God's best. So be prepared to put things to one side and then just go for God's best that he can just bless. Okay, so thanks for following me in this talk. Just if it's blessed you, you might like to share the link with some of your friends just to bless them. Okay, so thanks for following me on this Bible talk, and God bless you.